Talk about work. Proverbs says a lot about the lazy man. In fact, there are at least 3 lengthier sections discussing laziness or the good work ethic, basically. We used to talk about the Judeo-Christian work ethic. So as we think about the history of America, at least in the histories I'm familiar with, there's a connection with the Judeo-Christian work ethic. Our pioneers, founding fathers, were hard-working people. And it's called Judeo-Christian because it is rooted in the Old Testament, particularly. And there is a biblical perspective of work that phrase, Judeo-Christian work ethic, it seems to try to capture. So even the American dream of the 20th century, there was the idea of if you work hard. You can be president someday if you want to be. But it was not presented as if it was just, if you dream big enough, you can eventually become president. It was, at least in its earlier stages, if you study, if you apply yourself, if you work hard, you can be what you want, be whatever you want to be. You can have 2 cars in your garage. You can have a chicken in every pot. You can have 2.5 children and a good retirement and all the things that are seemingly associated with the American dream. But it wasn't tied in with just, America will give it to you. You're owed these things, and so you live by virtue of you being an American, and we'll give it to you. It was tied in, if you work hard, if you apply yourself, you can do these things. And that idea, I've not heard it mentioned in quite a while. And certainly I never hear it anymore outside of Christian conversation. It used to be something you would hear in some secular conversation. I never hear it outside of Christians talking about work or talking about our culture. And it really is, I would say it's fallen by the wayside. And I want to be careful here because every generation complains about the work ethic of the next generation. It's always, every generation says kids these days. And the kids these days are going to say that about, in 40 years, they're going to be saying that too. And there seems to be every generation complains about their work ethic, and yet at the same time, we do look and there are, I would say, genuine cause for concern in the work ethic that we see typically among young people. There seems to be a very different perspective of work than my generation had or your generation had, and with that has come, I think it's gone hand in hand with the rejection of biblical values, but it also, I would say there's an explicit rejection of what I think of as a Judeo-Christian work ethic. There's an explicit rejection of the idea that you must work hard to achieve. Let me give you 2 statements that Proverbs says right up front about work and about laziness. And it says, the lazy man is a fool, and the lazy man is a sinner. So what we're talking about, and we recognize in the world of the book of Proverbs, folly and sin are the same. I'm saying the same thing twice. I'm saying it just 2 different ways here. This laziness is not simply, I wish kids would do better. It's not simply something that he just, a foible of the personality. It's not simply a bent or, their quirks. It is a sin. And so we have to start with that foundation, even as we're thinking through all of this. And as we work through, I think by the time we're done, we'll be able to formulate a more clear definition of what it means to be lazy. And that's important as we're thinking through this, because it's not necessarily somebody is lazy because they don't get up as early in the morning as I do, or because they don't work as late at night as I do, or because their work requires less physical labor than my work does. There's a lot of, I would say, opinions that go into laziness and to people's view of laziness. And so we need to formulate a good definition of what actually is the sin of laziness. And I think we'll do that as we're going through. I think we'll be able to put one together. So we're just going to start with these statements. So the lazy man is a fool. The lazy man is a sinner. Proverbs 18, verse 9 says, "He who is slothful in his work is a brother to him who is a great destroyer." So remind you the kinds of parallelism. You have repeating, which says same thing twice. Contrasting says same thing from two different perspectives. Developing, the second line adds to or completes the thought of the first line. Illustrating, that one line is restated in another using a figure of speech. There's a word picture involved. Building, that each line builds on the ideas of the previous lines. A pivoting parallel is there's usually 3 lines or more. The center line applies directly to the first and last lines. There's the mirroring, the chiasm, in which the same idea is repeated in reverse order. The cause and effect, and informal, just really a statement there. So I know I raced through those. I'm hoping you have your sheet somewhere handy, but what kind of parallelism is this one? This is one of those, I don't think is really a lot of, there's a definite right answer, but I lean towards the illustrating, because actually of the phrase "is a brother." It indicates that this is a figure of speech. There's a metaphor at work here. He's drawing a relationship between the lazy and the destroyer. And so I lean towards the illustrating, though again the developing, there's great argument for that too. I think Ann summarized nicely. So, but that's where I would put it, is either illustrating or developing. So as we're looking at this, there's a couple very obvious parallels, and that are just repeating parallels. So what is the very obvious repetition? Yeah, he who and him who. I didn't even mark them in the PowerPoint, but those two are the definite parallels connecting these really all together. So what's the first kind of person? So you have the slothful one, and it's directly connected to in his work. And so the one who is lazy or slothful about his work. What's the second comparison? So we have now a great destroyer. So you have the lazy man. This great destroyer is somebody that comes in and just takes that which is good and makes it good for nothing. And so this is quite a powerful comparison. You really start thinking about what's going on. A lazy man is compared here to somebody who comes in and decimates the good. So that, a great destroyer of crops. We have scarecrows. I think we still have scarecrows, because crows come in and destroy the crops. We have here deer come in and wipe out a garden. And all, right when your stuff is getting just perfectly ripe, the night before you're ready to harvest everything, the deer come through and eat half of it and stomp some of it on the ground and take little nibbles out of the rest, so that your great crop that you're planning to have is reduced to a tomato. And that's the kind of destruction that he compares a lazy person to. So the slothful one is just as wasteful as the animals that come through and just decimate the field. Or fire that comes through and wipes out the house. What's the relationship? What's the relationship between the slothful and the great destroyer? As a brother. What's he communicating with this word brother? Is he saying that in a family there's lazy brother and great destroyer? So you got one that won't get out of bed and the other one who spends all of his time starting fires and ruining crops. Is this a literal brotherhood? No. So what's he saying here? What does he mean by brother? Family, which is what? I mean, what kind of connection is that? Yeah, there is a deep connection, a deep intimacy. There's also, we're talking about family. It's not just it should be a relational closeness. There's often is a similarity. So that you join, you take a family picture. You usually can look and say, yeah, I see you're all related. You look like your mom, or you look like your dad, or you look like a combination of the two. There is a great similarity between them, so that this connection between them is substantial, so that ultimately what he is saying is, I will say it this way, the fruit of the lazy man's laziness is very similar, looks a lot like the fruit of the destroyer's destruction. So the end result of laziness and destruction, I think Proverbs here is saying, is the same. And that word brother there is connecting. There is a strong affiliation between a lazy man and a destroyer. So that the lazy can't say, well, at least I don't go around starting fires. And Solomon say, yeah, you do. So again, trying to understand this verse as we think through some principles from it. And a couple weeks ago, we were talking about the difference between principles and application. And let me help in thinking through this a little bit more. Principle, we're looking to understand the verse. You're making sure, trying to get our heads around what does this verse say. So principle is a restatement of what the verse says. An application then is now, what do I do with it? So let me give you a couple other ones. Neglect of proper business is wasteful. The neglect of the proper business, that's certainly what he means by in his work. There is a proper obligation. There are things that should be done. And to neglect those is wasteful. Let me give you a real simple one. Checking the oil in your car. Actually, we just had a conversation about this a couple weeks ago in the Friday Men's Fellowship, and I think several people said, I haven't checked the oil in my car in years. Because it never burns oil, was the point. So let's go back 20 years ago where you had to check your oil regularly. Would it be wasteful to not check your oil? It's a simple task. It's an easily forgotten one too, but it's a simple task. And yet if you fail to do it, it may end up in the complete loss of a functional vehicle, or at the very least the loss of thousands of dollars to repair the engine or to replace the engine that was damaged by your failure to check the oil. Neglect of proper business is wasteful. Neglect is also akin to destruction. We've already touched on this, but except I will say Solomon with this phrase here, he is brother, is very, very emphatic. There's a stressing of this relationship between laziness and destruction. To say it another way, passivity in place of productivity results in loss. If you don't do what you should do, you're going to lose. If you don't go weed the garden, you're going to lose crops. If you don't plant, you're not going to have any harvest. If you don't show up at work and every Tuesday of the week when you're supposed to be there, what eventually is going to happen? Yeah, you're not going to have a job anymore. Even if you have a strong union, you're eventually going to get fired for not showing up at work. So Solomon is saying that this laziness results in loss. So what do we do? So that's roughly our own restatement of the verse. How do we apply these principles, the truths of this verse, in our lives? Work. I had to say it a little bit lengthier, more lengthy than that, but be diligent to do the work given to you. And we're going to come back to this in a minute, but a big part of this is doing the proper work. And just be diligent to do the work that you need to do. Don't just be busy, but be doing the right work. And I'll say it a different way. Actively refuse to be passive. The sluggard's problem is he just doesn't want to do. His life is just ruled by passivity. And there has to be just that refusal. I'm not going to just do nothing and let the world go by and hope it all works out. But instead to take an active role in life. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 4. It says, the lazy man will not plow because of winter. He will beg during harvest and have nothing. In our culture, that's an odd, in our environment, that's an odd first line. He will not plow because of winter. Obviously, you can't plow. The ground's frozen. And it's winter. It's certainly not like this by any means. It is typically rainy. And so, it's certainly going to be some unpleasant, wet, long days. And so the lazy man looks and says, it's raining. And it's cold. It's 40. It's cold. Which, that climate again, that's cold. And so there's going to be a reason that he does not plow. And so we have now a cause and effect. The cause is what? He will not plow. What's the effect? Yeah, he's going to go hungry. So you have now the individual being discussed is the lazy man. So the second line, the he, is still the lazy man. What will he not do? He will not plow. He will not plow. What will he do? He will beg. The contrast here, and this is what he's showing, is this contrast. He's not going to do this. Therefore, he will do this. And this is the problem with laziness, is it doesn't actually get you out of doing anything. You still have to do something. It's just you're going to be a lot more uncomfortable when you deal with the consequences of laziness. He will beg, and he will have nothing. That's what he's going to get. Because he refuses to work, he will end up begging, relying on the charity of others. And they're not going to give. I mean, still today, somebody refuses to work. He could work and he won't work. And now he's asking me for money. Are you going to give him money? No. In fact, part of our benevolent policies here, if someone's capable and refuses, willingly, knowingly turns down work, refuses to work, we're not helping them out financially. They're just not going to do it because he is being lazy. He's being sinful and refusing to do what he could do. And I think I know it's a biblical principle. Paul says, if he that will not work shall not eat. And Solomon is saying here, and I would say this is an observational principle, the one who refuses to work and then he's begging come May when everybody else is bringing in their harvest and he's hungry, they're not going to look at him and say, oh yeah, here you go. They're going to say, why weren't you out here with the rest of us in December plowing your field? That's all they're going to give him. And so there's a number of principles we could take from this. There is a right time to work them. How else would we state what this verse is saying? If you will suffer, if you're not working when you should be, you will suffer the consequences. So there's a proper time to work. Failure to work at the right time leads to need. Now, let me add one in here. As we talked about the climate there, it's not really comfortable to be out, especially if it's wet and colder. It's really not comfortable to be out working. So work is often uncomfortable, but failure to work at the right time is laziness. So this is part of what Solomon is saying. Is it's laziness to not work when you should be working. So somebody's out there right now trying to get their firewood for this winter. There's a good reason to think maybe they were lazy during the summer. Now, not knowing any more about the situation, there'd be other questions that need to be asked. But somebody who waits until you need the firewood to go cut down a tree is actually being lazy. You work at the right time to properly drop, to have time to drop the tree, split it, and dry it, so you actually burn it. Now there's a proper timing. So when we think about laziness, it's not just, again, whether or not you're working, but when. And if I refuse to work because I don't like it, it's laziness. Easy example. Jim was talking about shoveling snow earlier. Is it comfortable to be outside in the cold shoveling snow, slipping on ice? No. None of us think it's particularly fun and comfortable. Unfortunately, you have to work. You have to shovel snow when it snows. I can't wait till the warm weather to shovel all the snow out of the way. I have to deal with it at the right time, even though I would much rather be sitting inside the warm house. Work is often uncomfortable. We also see a preference for present comfort may produce greater discomfort in the future. You see, you don't work now because of the winter, you're going to be hungry and starving in the summer. So preference for the present comfort may and often does produce that greater discomfort. Inaction has consequences. We keep talking about in Proverbs, choices have consequences. We say actions have consequences. Solomon also teaches inaction has consequences. It is a choice. And he also says few will have pity on the lazy. So there's several things we see in understanding this verse. These are several truths that this verse communicates. So what do we do with those truths? How do we apply them? Work when you should. Work at the right time. I don't know if it's generally true or not, but there are certainly among pastors and pastor training schools and such, there's always hear the warnings about the pastor who stays up late on Saturday night preparing his sermon. And Somebody say, well, there's a lot of reasons some of them give for that. I've met a couple that actually do that. But, someone will say, well, see, look, he works late into the night preparing his sermon. Look how diligent and hardworking he is. And I'm going to argue he's lazy. For a variety of reasons, Saturday night is exactly the wrong time to write your sermon. I won't delve into all of that. He should be working, at the very least, all throughout the week. And he may not ever stay late at the office. But if he's working on it and he works starting on Monday, again, at the very least, I think it'd be really good for him to start working on next year's sermons this year. But he should be at least Monday beginning to wrestle with the text and working on it throughout the week so that come Saturday it's done. Didn't stay late any night. Maybe he didn't show up early any morning. But he just plugged away, working, and I would say working in the pace and timing that is proper to give time for the truths of the Word to actually sink in and for him to meditate on those truths in his own life before seeking to apply them to other lives. And so working when you should doesn't just mean getting it done before the deadline, but working in a proper fashion so that it is done and done well in a timely manner. Do not neglect work because it is unpleasant. Don't let discomfort keep you from it. And then with that as well, and Proverbs is going to make this very clear in a little bit, plan ahead so that you will have what you need. Planting, harvesting. If you're going to be a farmer, you have to plan ahead. If you want tomatoes in September, when do you start them? Months ahead of time. Anything you're growing like that, you have to plan ahead. You can't say in August, oh, I wanted tomatoes this year. I better hurry up and get them in the ground and throw lots of fertilizer on them and expect to get a crop of any sort. You have to plan ahead. That's part of what's happening here. As Jim has already reminded us, make hay while the sun shines. But Proverbs is very, very descriptive. Some of its most descriptive language is reserved for the lazy one. So Proverbs 15, verse 19, it tells us, the way of the lazy man is like a hedge of thorns. Life of the lazy one is difficult. His path is through a briar patch, is what he's saying. So we have blackberries back here. Anybody enjoy walking through the blackberries? No, not a bit. It's, even aside from getting scratched up, it's difficult. They're all tangled together. There's a mass in front of you. It's not easy walking. And the lazy man, his life is difficult, and I don't think in this case that Solomon is saying, if you will, a cause and effect, is saying that it should be difficult or that it will be punished by having his life difficult. I think what he's saying is that this man's laziness makes everything more difficult than it needs to be, that his life actually is harder because of his laziness. Have you ever had a cleaning job that you've just let go? Don't raise your hand or confess to this, but you know there's a room in the house that you've been using to store junk in, and you need to clean it up and sort through everything, and you let it go, and you, of course, keep adding to it, and then eventually you get around to it, and it's this mammoth task of trying to clean out this room, maybe that's full of stuff. That's a lot more difficult than if you had taken, whenever you got whatever it is you had to deal with first and say, okay, I'll take care of this week. I will sort through this. I will take this box. I will throw this stuff away, put put away what needs to be put away, give away what needs to be given away. And if you do it a box or a package at a time, you do it a little bit at a time, you might spend the year that you spent collecting your room full of junk, you might spend that whole year, a little bit at a time getting rid of stuff as you got it. You never got the room full of junk because you gave the junk away and threw the junk away. That's a whole lot easier than having to go back in the room where you just shoved everything, because that took a minute instead of 15 minutes a week. And then at the end of that year, you have this room. Now, stuff in there that was good is now bad, because he that is slothful is brother to him that is a great destroyer. Plus this room that has been buried under all of this rotting accumulation of debris must be thoroughly cleaned, because it's musty and probably some mold somewhere, and no telling what the mice have done. And you've now made your life more difficult by the laziness of not doing the proper thing at the proper time. Proverbs 19:24 is vivid. This is one of my favorite ones. A lazy man buries his hand in the bowl and will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. It's actually, this one is so good, Solomon repeats it again later. A lazy man puts his hand in the bowl. So he sits down to supper. And, they didn't have utensils. So they would have eaten with their hands. Puts his hand in the bowl to take a bite of food, and it is too much trouble. It is exhausting to pick your hand up and put it to his mouth. Obviously, this is a caricature. But what he is saying, he is too lazy to do anything. Even the things he wants to do. The things that he desires the food. He's hungry. But he's too lazy to do anything, even the things that he would do. He also covets greedily all day long. In fact, he tells us that he is killed by his desire. Proverbs 21:25 says, the desire of the lazy man kills him, for his hands refuse to labor. He covets greedily all day long, but the righteous gives and does not spare. This is one of the traps of laziness. Being lazy doesn't mean you don't want anything. There's often a strong, strong desire. I would say the lazy man is ruled by his desires. He's being ruled by his desires for ease, but he's also being ruled by desire for all of these other things. We know those people who have that entitlement mentality. I should have. I shouldn't have to work for it. I should just have it. That's a mark of this lazy fool. And it is a destructive desire. He wants, but he's too lazy to work for it. He lacks what he wants. And that desire just eats him away. And so spiritually, it is destructive. It is rotting away his very soul. Kenneth Aitken says he is better than most at lying in bed, dreaming ambitious dreams. That's what the lazy man does. And I'm going to look at one more, and then we'll pick up at this next week. He claims a lion is in the street. It says, a lazy man says, there's a lion outside. I shall be slain in the streets. What a statement. In the Middle East, they did have lions. I think they're all extinct in the Middle East now, but they did have lions, even well after the time of Solomon. And the claim, I think, is pretty straightforward. If I go outside, I'm going to get killed. I'm staying inside. It's safer. There's a little bit of snow on the road. If I go outside, if I drive down to work, I might get in a wreck. Or I don't feel good this morning. I wake up and I don't feel quite so good. I'm gonna work up my slight sniffle into full-blown cold. It's looking for excuses, and often they are just ridiculous. It really is just any excuse is what this comes down to. Any reason, any justification not to work is good enough for the lazy one.